you'll be seeing some new programming coming forward from us as we go into 2021. And I hope if you're interested, you can join our email list and we'll keep you posted. I'm also happy to say that the past talks that we've done, and this one will be posted there too, are all available on the Adams State University YouTube channel under a Salazar playlist. So we're building hopefully a useful library of water educational talks and information for people that want to learn more about the challenges, beauty, future of the Rio Grande Basin here. So Arnold Valdez has been working on the history and documentation of acequias. A lot of that work started, he's trained as an architect and has done a lot of work in land use planning, and he worked on documentation of acequias while working at the city of Santa Fe and then also teaching at the University of New Mexico. So he did historical documentation of acequias. And he also is a living acequia water user on the Cerro Ditch near San Luis in the southeastern part of the San Luis Valley. He was born and raised here, fourth generation resident of the valley. He's also, luckily, happily for us, working on a book on acequia landscapes. So we'll look forward to that information being all compiled and available in the hopefully near future. He's also publishing a section on another Acequia La Bajara ditch, I hope I said that right, which is near Cochita Pueblo in New Mexico and will be published by the University of New Mexico. So Arnold Valdez today will give us an overview of acequias from both a historical perspective and their current role in communities, as well as the issues facing them and all water users as we experience climate change, cultural change, and more that's coming at all of us. So please welcome Arnold Valdez, and we look forward to your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ria, and thank you for inviting me for this presentation. I'm very excited to share with you this information.
We just need you to speak up, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, is that better?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for having me at this presentation. I would like to start out by talking a little bit about and defining acequia landscapes, what they are. Acequia landscapes are a cultural landscape that encompass an evolution of the natural environment and the Indo-Hispano settlement patterns or land grants. There are several distinctive features of the acequia irrigation system that set it apart from other types of irrigation systems. And as you can see from this slide, there are certain characteristics that will define an acequia landscape. Typically, there's evidence of Spanish colonial era construction, or maybe Pueblo historic context as well, or sometimes even both. Acequias are a distinguishing landscape feature. You can usually look at a landscape out here in this arid Southwest, and when you see a ribbon of green in the landscape, that's typically an acequia out there. So they are very distinct from the aridness and the dry features of the landscape. Acequias create circulation networks in the form of paths and historic trails. Oftentimes, acequias were used as pathways or veredas, where people could walk along the acequias from one house to another, not only doing maintenance and irrigation, but also just as a form of travel and I guess even recreation in a sense. Along with acequias, adjacent to acequias, there's always space that's allocated for agriculture, for the plots that are irrigated, obviously the main purpose for acequias. And along with the acequia landscape is the built environment that evolves, which includes houses, public buildings, community buildings, other types of structures associated with the typical settlement patterns of the Hispano settlement. It also forms a special corridor for plants and animal life, extending beyond the watershed. And ultimately, it's an agricultural system that utilizes the carrying capacity of land and water. Acequias are being used primarily for small-scale agriculture in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado Hispano farms of the United States that are still being used in other parts of the world, such as this slide of a Qanat irrigation system in Iran, where there is a shallow canal that picks up water from these underground deposits and wells and channels it through the landscape to the agricultural plots. The word acequia is derived from the Arabic acequia, meaning that which gives water. Acequias are irrigation ditches that allow water to be conveyed from a watershed to agricultural fields via gravity flow. Acequias have evolved over 10,000 years in the Middle Eastern arid landscapes. Harnessing and control of water has been inherent in settlements ranging from Mesopotamia to Persia, Arabia, North Africa, and Spain. With the colonization of the New World, the Spanish transferred the acequia technology to the arid landscape. Even though acequias were introduced, they were already some existing prehistoric water canals used by ancient cultures in North America, Mesoamerica, and South America, such as the Hohokam and Anasazi culture. In these two maps, you can kind of see the layout. The pre-Columbian empires on the left illustrate historic Native American settlements of the Chaco Canyon, Anasazi, the Hohokam culture. And then throughout Central America, there are also enclaves of acequias, the Aztec, Mayan cultures, and further in South America, the Inca as well. The slide on the right is a blow-up showing the territory of the Anasazi cultural settlements and Hohokam settlements. It's amazing to think of the network of acequias that the Hohokam established. In this one map, this system encompassed the largest body of land irrigated in prehistoric times in North or South America, and even perhaps the world. This system utilized at least 1,000 miles of canals and irrigated over 1,000 acres of land. It's amazing to look at the network of these canal systems. The slide on the right is a blow-up of a typical acequia diversion scheme that occurs along the main river. There's a canal that takes the water from the main river. In this case, it's a salt river. Diverts the water into an irrigation diversion gate. And then from there, it goes into a sub-network of smaller acequia systems, which are then used to distribute water throughout the field patterns. And so you can kind of see just how intricate and elaborate this whole system of irrigation was. In the Chaco Canyon, there is also an equally amazing system that was basically created by capturing water, groundwater, or surface water from the from the landscape via the catchment areas. Water would be diverted into a diversion dam or several diversion dams, and then from there, the water was channeled through a canal down to a multiple head gate. From there, the water also goes into a distribution network of smaller canals and gates and used to irrigate the bordered gardens. So that checkerboard pattern that you kind of see there are little garden plots, these bordered gardens as they're called, which receive water by gravity flow from the system that traps the water in the upper part of the landscape. Those acequias were dug as the first tasks by the settlers. Perhaps one of the first documented acequias to be dug in 1598 by Oñate in the San Juan Pueblo was the acequia that diverted off of the Rio Grande. In this historic photo, it's kind of faded, but you can see that water was taken directly from the Rio Grande and formed a network of acequia systems that were then used to irrigate the plots that the settlers were establishing. As the settlements evolved in New Mexico, acequia systems began to flourish. Currently, there are over 800 acequias in New Mexico. You can kind of see the concentration of the acequias in the slide. The majority of them are located in northern New Mexico bioregion area, includes Taos, Rio, Oliva, and other counties adjacent to the New Mexico-Colorado border. There are also other enclaves of acequias located in the Gila wilderness area down in western New Mexico, and then as well as in the kind of Ruidoso area. There's also a concentration of acequias in that area as well. In southern Colorado, there are estimated 150 active acequias in the counties of Costilla, Conejos, Huérfano, and Los Animas counties. The most robust acequia landscapes are near the town of San Luis. Here there are about 76 working acequias that support 300 families. most of whom are descendants of the original land grant settlers. These Acequia farms and ranches operate as they did when they were originally settled, growing heritage crops, raising livestock that are grazed on Acequia-fed wet meadows. The Acequia landscape associated with an Acequia encompasses an upslope drainage area or watershed known as a catchment basin, or known as La Cuenca in Spanish. It begins with a collection area that eventually drains water into a water catchment drainage or network or hierarchy of small streams and seepages. The Sangre Cristo Mountains and foothills serve as the watershed environment that provide runoff in the form of rain, snow, and seepages within the Culebra Basin. Since surface water flows from the first order streams into the second and third orders, eventually becoming a river at some point where a portion of the water is diverted via the presa onto a man-made hydrologic conveyance system, commonly known as the Acequia Madre, or the main earthen ditch. The Acequia then follows the upper contours of the landscape, providing irrigation water to the agricultural fields via a subsystem of linderos and sangrias. This slide here illustrates the watershed networks of Costilla County. As you can see, there's an extensive network throughout the county, starting at the upper part with the Trinchera watershed, forming again a dendritic pattern of first and second, third order streams that eventually become the main streams that flow to the communities of Fort Garland, Blanca, and on down. In the southern part of the county is where the Rio Culebra area is located, and again you can see the vast network of small streams are coming together to form the main irrigation river, which in this case is the Rio Culebra, and eventually flows to the town of San Luis, and historically used to flow to the Rio Grande, although anymore it just flows more into the southern part of the county. In contrast to this, the Acequia system network, you can also see a dotting of center pivot irrigation sprinklers. These are being set up in the more of the central part of the county and western part of the county. So these are systems that are drawing extensive groundwater from underground aquifers. Since the water from the Acequia requires gravity flow, the working landscape incorporates a system of terraces. The Acequia terrace transect begins through the Acequia, diverting at the upper section of the river, providing irrigation to the lower altito or terraces or irrigated highlands. The next level below is a priced irrigated land known as La Joya, or the Jewel. Below La Joya are the vegas, or the meadows or pasture lands that are closer to the river and have a higher groundwater level, requiring little or no irrigation. The last level adjacent to the Acequia or to the river is the Cienega, or the wetlands. The river itself is a lush riparian corridor, giving rise to floodplain vegetation or dense forested land known as the bosque. This last slide with the Acequia landscape is meant to illustrate a typical watershed Acequia landscape. You can see the upper part, La Cuenca, which is the water catchment area with the dendritic network of streams. They all flow, converge, eventually becoming a larger stream. In this case, it's the Rio Culebra. You can also see the presa at the upper part, which is the main diversion structure in the river, where the water is diverted to the network of acequias. In this case, I'm illustrating the Acequia del Cerro, which has two main branches, actually, that flow, one at the upper part of the landscape and the other one at the lower part of the landscape. You can also see another small Acequia segment from the Acequia de San Pedro that also flows off of the Rio Culebra. And along with that, you can see the typical plotting of the long lot patterns that are associated with the typical land grant settlement patterns. You can see those flow perpendicular to the river. And then we have the common lands, the Vega Commons, which is an extensive common area just outside of the town of San Luis. And then the ejidos, or the grazing lands that are more located in the foothills on the sides of the landscape. Collectively, the terrace system of agricultural related functions are associated with the land division that incorporates the long, narrow lots, as I mentioned, that are platted perpendicular to the river or tributary valley. These field patterns of French origin are known as extensiones or vada strips, named after the Spanish unit of measurement used in laying out their width. The long lots provide a transit of the terrain, allowing each homestead an equitable portion of land with a cross-section of all the natural elements essential for surviving in an arid landscape. Now I'd like to mention a little bit, a brief overview of the history of Colorado water law as it relates to acequias. As a headwater state, Colorado has no major rivers that flow into its boundaries. It does, however, have 5 major rivers or headwaters that begin here and flow out of state. They include the Colorado River, whose waters begin in the mountains and flow through the states of Utah, Arizona, and California, and onto the country of Mexico. Most notably, the Colorado River is the river that formed the beautiful Grand Canyon. Next come the North and South Platte rivers. They headwater in the northern part of the state and ultimately make up the waters of the Missouri River, while the upper and lower Arkansas rivers join and flow to the southeastern part of the state, making up the mighty Mississippi River. Finally, there is the Rio Grande River, which has its origins in the high mountains above Creed and on a continental divide. The Rio Grande's waters are shared by the states of Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and the country of Mexico. In the United States, there are 2 basic systems of water law. There's the riparian and the prior appropriation. Under riparian law, persons who own land next to a stream are entitled to use the stream's water roughly in proportion to the percentage of land along their stream. In the arid West, state laws are generally based on the doctrine of prior appropriation. In 1876, Colorado became the first state to officially adopt the prior appropriation doctrine as part of the Constitution. The doctrine is often described as first in time, first in right. This means that the first person to file for the water right will get to use the water before the person who filed after them. Colorado recognizes that seniority is valuable and recognizes the needs of a senior water right holder are always met prior to those of junior water right holders. In this case, acequias are senior water right holders, whereas junior water right holders might be those that have underground systems such as the center pivot sprinklers. The doctrine of prior appropriation provides that the water of every natural stream is public property dedicated to the use by diversion and application to beneficial use, subject to the rights of prior appropriators. In 1879, Colorado created water districts to mediate the growing demand for water. At that time, Rio Culebra acequias fell under the jurisdiction of Water District 24 of Water Division 3. Decreed by District Court in 1889, water rights in the Rio Culebra were declared first in time and first in right. Consequently, Water Division 24 holds the oldest water decrees in Colorado. Of the 83 acequias in the Rio Culebra watershed currently in operation, the earliest are the San Luis Peoples Ditch, the San Pedro Ditch, the Montes Ditch, Vallejos Ditch, San Acacio Ditch, Cerro Ditch, Francisco Sanchez Ditch, Lemestas Ditch, San Francisco Ditch, Little Rock Ditch, Torcillo, and the Abunda Martinez Ditch. The slide there illustrates a list of acequias, various acequias in order of priority with the date of construction on the side there. Today, a Colorado Water Commissioner ensures that the water gets to the acequia head gate for the beginning entry point. After that, it's up to the individual acequias and mayordomos to distribute the water equally among the community. This method ensures each parciante or landowner gets an equal share of the water that is available, thus supporting the entire community. This is the only remaining equally shared water administration system still in use in Colorado. Now I'd like to address a little bit on acequia governance. In the Hispano community, custom dictates that the water be divided equally among all users by an overseer or the mayordomo. In 1866, The territorial legislature acknowledged Hispano irrigation traditions by authorizing Costilla and Conejos County acequias to conduct annual elections to select a mayordomo to mediate water use and disputes. Acequia irrigators also elect a comisión that supports and guides the mayordomo's work. The comisión also collects dues for overseeing the ditch, which are used for improvements to the acequias. Voting on such matters within the acequia is also done equitably. Each landowner is given one vote regardless of the size of the property. This means that a landowner with 1 acre has the same voting power as a landowner of 200 acres. Because tradition dictated water use, irrigation customs were unwritten. Since each acequia irrigates a specific site, affiliated water users or pacientes band together to maintain the acequia servicing their area. Pacientes are required to help repair their acequia according to the number of acres owned. Additionally, pacientes communally cleaned and repaired their acequia every spring. And you can see here, this is a slide showing the annual cleaning of La Cienega acequia in New Mexico and Santa Fe County. The mayordomo is overseeing the pacientes, which are each assigned a segment of the acequia to clean. And as they move along, he kind of leapfrogs them along, moving collectively so that they can all clean the acequia. Typically, the acequia cleaning can occur in a matter of a few hours, often taking a day or more, depending on how much or how extensive the debris is, and cleaning is necessary. Of utmost importance to the pacientes was the rotating the use of water. Simply to maintain harmony, the mayordomo ensures that the pacientes take turns using the water and that no one takes more than his fair share. The final task of the mayordomo is to ensure that pacientes do not build dams nor place obstacles that might obstruct the flow of water to his neighbors or vecinos. Assuring that each acequia's water is given equally to each landowner is why the mayordomo and the acequia irrigation are still in use today. In 2009, the Colorado legislature passed the ACE recognition law. This law recognized, quote, acequias are unique and long-standing cultural and legal institutions in Colorado. Spanish and Mexican farmers and ranchers who settled here long before Colorado became a state created these systems for irrigation and water sharing that ensure sustainable use of water and create important community bonds, unquote. Despite their long history, which includes acknowledgement in the session laws of the Colorado Territory, it was not until 2009 that acequias received recognition in Colorado statutes. The 2009 Acequia Recognition Law, which was amended in 2013, allows acequias to continue to exercise their traditional roles in governing community access to water and also strengthens their ability to protect their water. For acequias in Colorado to take full advantage of the statute, it is necessary to have a set of written bylaws that formalize existing customs and adopt recently recognized powers. This is currently being done now in the Rio Culebra system with the assistance of a legal team from Denver. They're helping acequias create bylaws that formalize existing customs and create a written guide to what the acequias powers and capabilities are. The entire San Luis Valley, including the Culebra watershed, are part of the systems of uplands and meadows fed by rain and snow from the Sangre de Cristo and the San Juan mountain ranges. The mountain range surrounding the San Luis Valley have been designed by nature to store accumulated snow, which slowly releases melted water onto the streams and recharges the vast underground network via alluvial fans. This is the weather cycle that our ancestors depended upon to maintain acequias, and this is the key to settlement, continued settlement in the 21st century. Again, you could see a contrast in the irrigation systems here in the valley. You could see the large concentration of center pivot sprinklers in the center Monte Vista area, with also a large cluster in Conejos, Rio Grande County, and sprinkling also in Costilla County as well, which creates an interesting contrast to the surface water systems of the acequia. Population in Colorado is growing, leading to greater pressures to secure land and water rights and to open the uplands to mass recreation. Front Range is exploding, causing metropolitan centers to become large sieves for energy, land, and water. Green space in cities is often limited. Places like the San Luis Valley are in the path of 21st century development schemes. Will the uplands be restricted to wealthy tourists and second home developments? Will large underground aquifers face increasing pressure for export? The San Luis Valley has a bleak history of pushing nature with large-scale agriculture, which utilizes groundwater via thousands of center pivot sprinklers that have the capability of depleting the aquifer. This is a slide from the 2019 growing season for Subdistrict 1. And so you could see the extensive cluster of irrigation sprinklers. These are all drawing water from the aquifer, creating a situation where there may be depletion of that aquifer at some point, which will make it extremely difficult for senior water users to extract their water. And a lot of it has to do with extensive use of water, extensive water crops such as alfalfa that require lots of water. I think it's starting to shift now to crops that are low water uses such as hemp and other maybe grains that may not use as much water. In contrast to the surface water uses, the acequieros can offer an alternative to elaborate pumping systems and electrical energy. In stark contrast, the southeastern edge of the valley is a mosaic of land patterns reliant upon gravity and the topography of the landscape. In the long run, which system will be sustainable? In time, continual pumping will diminish the aquifer, leaving only a potential for surface water collection and utilization of water as acequias have done for ages. As acequia water users, we must plan for protecting our watershed and utilizing water in the most efficient manner possible. We are vulnerable to the impacts of population, land use, and climate change. Costilla County, my homeland, is also a disturbed landscape. Thousands of residential lots have been platted with hundreds of miles of roads and no power or water. The Culebra villages are an enclave at the southern edge of the county. As a result of the remaining relatively undeveloped and in agricultural production, the villages have managed to survive using acequias for irrigation. We are dependent on a healthy watershed for survival in this harsh land. The elevation helps capture the moisture while the forest canopy shades the snowpack for gradual release to the acequias. In recent times, however, it seems that the spring is becoming warmer, leading to earlier runoff with dry summers. One can see that the Rio Culebra Basin is experiencing drought. The alarming rise in temperatures coupled with record low snow and rainfall and unseasonal harsh winds have destabilized the snowpack on the Culebra Massif. The erratic weather conditions caused many farmers and ranchers to limit production. As most acequias were dry in 2018 and 2020. Correspondingly, the Rio Culebra Basin's diverse ecosystem is undeniably at risk. The ecosystem is being impacted by climate change, reducing the capacity for the uplands to sustain traditional communities via the historic acequias. The consequences of the contemporary weather trends, including high winds and dust storms, promote soil erosion and destruction of plant and wildlife habitats. Natural resources of La Sierra need to be protected and utilized in a manner that will continue to sustain the landscape. There are critical areas containing a wide diversity of plant and animal life. The forest canopy has been disturbed via years of unsustainable forestry practices. Logging roads lead high density create avenues for erosion. Water flows diverted to low spots, creating arroyos or gullies. In this last slide here, just illustrated a few of the acequia landscape threats and issues. There's climate change, global warming, water scarcity, water quality change, decline of farming and ranching, changes related to both inside and outside pressures, outside interests in nature and natural resource developments, threats of sprawl, uncontrolled growth, degradation of watersheds, changes in real estate, family lots are being transferred and subdivisions are being created, degradation of historic cultural resources, degradation of the scenic view shades, often through pipelines and other methods meant to mitigate acequias, end up actually creating problems to the view sheds. And then loss of wildlife habitats and diversity. So as you can see, it's a whole list of potential threats that we are concerned with and that need to be addressed in a systematic way. Our responsibility to the ecosystem and watershed is dual. We must plan to protect our immediate environment, and as traditional use right heirs to the mountain tract here in Costilla County, we have the responsibility for stewardship and to maintain a sustainable landscape. We must now work cooperatively to protect our watershed. It will require gathering data, planning work, and community meetings. There is too much at stake to forego our ability to plan for a sustainable future. Our ecosystem needs to be protected so that our acequias can flow onto our fields. Thank you. I'm open for questions if there's anybody that would like to question or comment on the presentation.
Thank you so much, Arnold, for your presentation. This is filled with so much information. A lot of this stuff is brand new to me, so thank you for sharing. I'm looking at the chat here, and we do have a question from Herman Martinez, who I saw is here. Herman, if you'd like to ask your question, please feel free to unmute your mic. Otherwise, I can share. Okay, so Herman asks, if Arnie, if you could speak to La Acequia Association about its history, its regional structure, if there are any active committees, any agenda reports, or if there are like any joint projects going on.
Is this in general for Acequia associations or specific to one particular one?
I believe so in general to La Acequia Association.
Okay. Well, basically, we've been following, as I mentioned, unwritten traditions up until the last few years. But I think once we start getting into a point where our watersheds are being threatened and extensive pumping, I think it became necessary to try to encapsulate the rules and regulations into some form of a document that will help guide us. That's why most of the acequias now are creating bylaws that illustrate, what the traditions are, the customs, management schemes, and the governance behind the Mayordomo and the Comisión Parciantes, what the roles are. So I think that's what's being done now as a measure to make sure that we're all on board with, traditional acequias, and that we can also seek protection through Colorado statutes and local land use planning regulations.
Are there joint projects currently going on, or are they meeting now?
Well, there are several projects going on in each of the acequias. Each acequia has its own unique circumstances. So a lot of them are upgrading their presas, for example, their water intake structures. They're upgrading their compuertas, their water diversion structures. A lot of them are, including myself, we're setting up systems of water piping, such as gated pipes, so that we can use the water more efficiently. The Cerro Ditch has undertaken a 2-year project, which I think is complete now, where they actually took a portion of the acequia and substituted a buried pipe to make it a little bit more efficient. It has its pros and cons. I'm all for the efficiency of the acequia via water use, but also it destroys the cultural landscape because you no longer have water that's going to feed the sides of the ditch, which become an area for habitat and wildlife. So there's something to gain and something to lose in each scheme.
Thank you so much, Arnold. Could I ask that you stop your sharing of the PowerPoint so we can go back to kind of the more of the meeting structure here?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We also have a question here from Lawrence Gallegos. Have you talked to acequias from other counties to determine what threats they are facing?
Well, a little bit, yeah. I've been focused more on this particular acequia here. This is the one that I belong to. I also interface. I think the Colorado Acequia Association, based here in Costilla County, is doing a lot of that work. I think they're doing a lot of reaching out to other acequias, other communities. I'm a little bit familiar with the acequias in Conejos County, having worked there for a few years when I was teaching at UNM, and I worked with Lawrence and other community members. So I think there is a networking, and the acequia congresses that have been held here also are a way or a forum for acequieros to get together and share the particular circumstances and resources that might be available.
Hi, this is Rio. If I could, oh, Lawrence, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to ask if the Rio Grande Compact, if that is causing issues with some of the Acequias in Costilla County, because it isn't Gonales County.
No, not at all, because actually we are not a tributary to the Rio Grande. We used to be historically, but not anymore. It's been a while since that was severed. So as far as I know, we are not obligated to provide a designated amount of water. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not a water expert, so I couldn't tell you for sure, but I know that we're not tributary to the Rio Grande.
And my question kind of related to that somewhat, Arnie, was about I've been so happy over these last however many years that the Acequias are pulling together and creating these new legal structures. And maybe what you just said, that you're not really, the water doesn't reach the Rio Grande anymore. So, but are the new structures, legal structures, you think going to help protect the Acequias from exportation or water, once they're in place, can water be sold out of an Acequia, or is it held through these legal structures in the water system?
I think water rights can be sold, and we caution landowners to try to keep it within the community or to sell it to other water users. Or there's also a system of water banking that could be incorporated. They're doing that in New Mexico. So yeah, no, we want to be aware of what our small, cachet of water rights are, and make sure that we keep it in the community. We don't encourage any kind of selling or exporting of water, because we are in a very severe super drought. And the last 2 years, 2018 and 2020, we suffered.
Not like there's extra water to be exported, right?
No, there's no extra water. We barely have enough, and sometimes not even enough.
Exactly, like this year, for
Yes.
example, yeah.
Yeah, Arnie, hi, I'm Alex Funk. Had a question, kind of going back to the challenges facing acequias. So it sounds like, climate change, drought, these appear to be fairly significant challenges. I mean, are there anything that the acequia communities are doing to sort of adapt to these challenges currently? So, we have these dry years. Are there sort of any sort of efforts underway to sort of look at how community might adapt to some of those conditions moving forward? And then, if so, are there any sort of barriers to adaptation that you foresee, or just any sort of innovative solutions to, kind of maybe add some resiliency to these systems?
Well, right now, I think what I see happening are just the creation of bylaws and kind of securing what the rules and regulations are, and trying to make sure that we're, protected under the law of Colorado statutes. There's some stuff being done in terms of water management. Individually, a lot of homeowners are working in conjunction with NRCS to try to create conservation plans and to try to have systems like gated pipe, more efficient ways. Also protecting our watershed. There are some efforts in Costilla County to create a watershed management plan. I think that's being headed by the Conservancy District. That's the big one, because we don't protect our watershed, which has already been damaged from extensive logging and other unsustainable land use practices. I think that's number one, is we got to protect that watershed and make sure that we can keep our water flowing freely as appropriated to the various acequia systems. So a combination of, I think, water management, water conservation is probably the key.
Now,
Thanks.
I'll just add that when the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable, over the years, we've done some tours in your area, in the area of around San Luis, and happily supported some of these projects you've talked about, Arnie, but seeing the watershed condition is probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, facing you guys, and the transport of sediment off the mountainsides and things like that, that then impact your ability to access that water. So that's something not unique to you guys, but certainly a big issue that I'm sure we'll hopefully be putting our heads together and helping with solutions in the time ahead. So.
Arnie, we have one more question in the chat here. Somebody was interested to the reference to Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent in your presentation. Salinity happened after years of irrigation, but they've not read anything about salinity in Colorado and New Mexico. Have you encountered any?
Not in our area in particular. I think we have a, a unique soil structure that is not very conducive. We have a high permeability in our soils, so you know, water just seems to kind of seep through. We have a hard time actually retaining water. We have very little organic matter in our soils, so it's not a concern, at least in this area, because due to probably the soil structure and maybe the geology of the watershed.
Thank you. We also have a question here from Aaron Montoya.
All right. Compadre Arnie Valdez, thank you very much. This is super informative and I'm really loving this presentation. I wish we could be together so I'll give you a great big hug. And thank you for being with us. Here's my virtual hug, and I have a kind of a question that's an inspirational question. What would you like to see from the next generation, and define that next generation as whatever, however you would, man. But I'm thinking of it in terms of, you know, teaching courses and working a lot with youth, and, you know, what can you give to me, and like, what do we need to do? What would you like to see happen with the next generation?
Well, I think education is key. You know, being able to provide historical accounts of what the Acequia system is through writings and books, having workshops, having tours of Acequias, walking tours, documenting historic Acequias, encouraging young people to get interested in agriculture. That's what I see as the main problem now. You know, with our generation, there doesn't seem to be much interest in the millennials, perhaps, you know, through education and through hands-on activities. And that's what I'm trying to do personally with my farm in San Luis, is to create more educational opportunities for agriculture and even things like architecture. My training is in architecture and planning, and so I'd like to also incorporate that in there, where it's holistic. It's not just one segment, but I think this whole lifestyle that we have known and grown up with in the San Luis Valley is critical to recognize and preserve and encourage others to do the same.
Thank you, Arnie. I think we might have time for one more question if there's anything else from any of the participants here. I'll open this up.
Well, I put a question there. If there's, Arnie, if you have some, you know, other resources, I'm going to post the link to the Colorado Acequia Association. I mean, looking forward to your book. I know there's that paper you have cited, or I've heard you talk about before, about the, I think of the environmental functions of acequias and cultural functions, and what any other resources you might steer people to who want to continue to learn more.
Yeah, I have a lot of information, so I will try to you know, get something that's be useful so that you can post it online for people to look at, and also slideshows and presentations from the past congressos too are available. So there's a large body of information that I'm quite willing to share and serve to educate the younger generation.
Great, thank you. We hope to be a distributor of that kind of information. Thank you. Well, appreciate everybody showing up here and listening today and learning. And I know it's the tip of the iceberg of all that this means to these communities, and historically, and for even the foundations, the beginnings of the state of Colorado, and the cultures that have first settled here, the people that settled here. So I hope that we can continue to build on this through the Salazar Center's Water Education Initiative.